On ClassicalU, you will notice that we have 3 levels of training for educators: Level 1, Level 2, and Level 3. This model is based on the medieval guild model, the Apprentice Model, where apprentices would study with the master for several years until they were able to work on their own and actually receive wages for their work. At this stage, the apprentice, who was a learner, would move from stage 1 to stage 2 and become what was often called a journeyman. A journeyman, the word apprentice is derived from the Latin word apprendere, which means to learn. So an apprentice is essentially a learner, a beginning learner. And in the medieval period, you might start at age 15, 16, 17, or 18 to start your training. But this idea of an apprentice, a novice, beginning to learn a trade or a craft has been with us since that time. Well, that second stage is the journeyman, when after an apprentice had been trained sufficiently, he or she could actually earn a good daily wage. And the word journeyman is derived from the Latin word diurnum, which means daily or a day's portion, basically referring to a day's work or a daily wage that the journeyman was able to earn. And of course, the journeyman could then take journeys and go to customers in the surrounding region in order to work, still under the supervision of the master. The journeyman could travel, and sometimes the journeyman would travel to visit with other masters to extend his education. So we will go from apprentice, beginner, someone just beginning to learn a craft, to a journeyman who's learned the craft sufficiently after observing the master and being tutored by the master, trained by the master, that the journeyman could work on his own and receive wages. That was stage 2. Stage 3 involved moving from journeyman to becoming a master oneself. How did that happen? Well, that happened after several years of additional training, working in a particular craft like, say, shoemaking, or perhaps working as a carpenter, or perhaps working as a stonemason. When would a journeyman be able to move into the master category? Once he had created a masterpiece. And often the guilds that governed and controlled the training of craftsmen in a particular trade, like, say, shoemaking, cobbler, the guild would look at the masterpiece and approve it as a masterpiece, and then take that masterpiece into the possession of the guild. It became kind of like a diploma piece. It became a certification that this craftsperson had actually become a master. So after completing a masterpiece and having that masterpiece assessed and certified as being a masterpiece by the guild, the journeyman would become a master and then could begin to train other apprentices. We have developed our system of training teachers in conversation with this apprentice model. So levels 1, 2, and 3 generally correspond to apprentice, journeyman, and master or mentor. And we like the term mentor as well, because mentor connotes the training and counseling and advising of a person. And, this kind of apprentice model was adopted in various ways in schools and colleges and universities throughout the centuries. We still see the remnant of it today in our colleges, where a new professor, a newly minted PhD professor, might be hired as an assistant professor. That's kind of level 1. And then after years of training and publishing and working, would be promoted to the rank of associate professor, and then finally full professor, the associate professor publishing and perhaps producing his own masterwork, a great publication in addition to research, would be recognized as a full professor. Sometimes professors are even called distinguished professors after moving through the years of training and teaching and research and publishing. Well, we also see in education a similar kind of a 3-step process when we think of undergraduate students getting their college degree or their bachelor's degree. That might be a level 1. And then moving on to graduate school, where they're trained underneath the master of some professors who are guiding the studies of these graduate students. It's interesting because in correspondence to the journeyman, the graduate student begins to teach often, and the graduate student often receives a stipend or wages or pay for teaching at a college or university as a graduate student. and participating often in the research that the professors are engaged in as well. That would be stage 2. Stage 3 would be after that graduate student receives his terminal degree, sometimes it's a master's degree, sometimes it's a doctorate degree, and then he can be hired as a master teacher and able to teach on his own. Well, we've just seen that even that PhD can go to the college and then kind of repeat this 3-step process of becoming an assistant professor to an associate professor to a full professor. There's a lot more to say about the apprentice model. I'll just make one more comment. To be apprentice means to be personally engaged by a master who's training you. That means that ClassicalU, as much as we're following this model and working with real persons who are on video and engaging via the digital media on the platform, can't be as personal as being in the flesh. And we think it's very important that every teacher who wants to be mentored, to become a mentor teacher herself or himself, needs to work in the flesh with veteran experienced master or mentor teachers as well. So ClassicalU hopes to come alongside what schools and homeschooling communities are doing, but doesn't think that we can actually replace in the flesh training and mentoring. But we can help and we can be a part of it. I hope that's been helpful. You can also read a couple of articles that we've placed on the blog of the ClassicalU website that describes more about how we're trying to implement this apprentice model.